Hey everyone, this is Corrina from Soundiron, and today we'll be looking at a composition I made using the drinking piano. To continue on with the theme that this piano may live in the bar with a lot of drinks spilled on it and some keys detuned or played so many times that they don't work anymore, I decided to make something that kind of emulated that similar atmosphere. So let's take a listen first, and then afterwards we'll take a look at each part. So as I was playing around with the different sounds in this library, I really enjoyed how different presets gave different textures and timbres, despite being the same instrument. And I really liked how even within individual notes, some notes were more detuned than others, or some had a louder attack, or, it just had so much diversity. And I feel like that gave me a lot of freedom to kind of just enjoy a more whimsical approach to this library. And so, taking a look at the intro, I first started with this left hand piano part. Sounds like this. I feel like that little rhythmic structure gave me a visual for some bumbling person who's a little tipsy or something like that, but at the same time pretty harmless. And then, in that empty space, he kind of like hiccups or just has a moment to himself where he kind of loses his way. I also wanted to give it a little bit more bass support, and so I just held a pedal point here on the C. So with the two together, and I just kind of had everything cut off at the same time to give it a full stop. Next, I wanted to add on to this idea of a hiccup, and so I used retro to create a small FX, and then I used a bit off, and then I also used close up to kind of put together a cluster of organized dissonant notes, but dissonant nonetheless. So these are the sounds put together. And then to fully encapsulate this tipsy atmosphere, I also added a lighthearted pads here. One is called Tipsy, and then also the other one was Echo. I thought that the pads themselves could give a nice, simple but effective lead line in the intro, so that it's not just a bass line or bass rhythm that's going on as we wait for something to happen, but there is already a world building going on in the beginning. So this is the pads put together. And then again, I cut it off right at the metaphoric hiccup. So that's the intro part. And then in the next part, it was definitely influenced by probably all the Nintendo games I played growing up. But something that I've noticed about a lot of Mario soundtracks and music is that they heavily use chromaticism, but in cute ways. And then when you pair that chromatic but whimsical melody with the boom, 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 kind of really encapsulates the Nintendo Mario kind of in a very surface level. It kind of captures that essence. This was where I started to really enjoy layering the different timbres that I found in drinking piano. They are all playing the same melodies, but I really enjoyed when I put them together and listened to them as a whole. And so the first one that I used was just the stock, just the drinking piano, and I just played the melody. This is what that sounds like. And then I layered that with one of our custom effects called retro. So if you notice, the first one had a slightly thinner quality to it, but it was a little bit brighter and it felt more like a real piano. In retro, it kind of took away from the bass and it also took away from the highs to create this more telephone feel. And so I really loved how it felt closer to your ears without being too overbearing. And then I added that extra sparkle by layering the initial default drinking piano setting on it. So this is the two put together. Similarly, with the bass, I layered the default with the retro. But with retro, I wanted to accentuate the 1 and 3 because then it would give a more stomping, clunky feeling, just to further emulate that bumbling person in the bar. And so this is what that sounds like. And then I layered that with the default again. And when I first played this, I thought that the upbeats weren't full enough. So I decided to add a few more filler notes in the upbeats, and this is what that sounds like. I also gave it just a little bit more sustain in the subsynth. I added the rum runner and I added sustain for sine to just give it a little bit more of a liquid feeling. So it's kind of sluggish. So this is all of the bass lines put together. And then to continue with the motif of this hiccup, I just continually inserted the hiccup throughout the piece. As you can see here, here, and here. It would not be as impressionable if I only played it once, but I wanted to make sure that visual idea was continually expressed. So then as I went into kind of the B part of this melody, I wanted to add another texture. Again, I just wanted to double it. I didn't want to do anything crazy so I could continue to shine focus on the melody. And so I used a little bit off. And what I really like about this particular FX is one is untuned and the other is tuned. And so it kind of gives a dissonance. It's around a half step away from each other. And so what I did was I just slowly faded in the untuned version into the tuned version so that it doesn't sound too dissonant, but it had a nice texture to it. So this is what that sounds like by itself. If I turned the untuned version to the tuned version at the same volume, it would sound really clashing. But let me just do it to show you what that would sound like. Still pretty cool from my perspective, but I wanted to keep it subtle so it doesn't distract. I pushed a bit off up an octave as well, not just to continue on the momentum, but also because the slight detuned feeling actually would really rub aggressively against the other two if they were in the same octave. And so I pushed it up higher so there's enough air and gap space between the two for it to not feel as aggressive. And then, lastly, there's this like cute turnaround here. So in this cute turnaround section, I also wanted to insert just a little bit of a timbral shift as well. And so what I used this time was I used fifths, MW, and this is what it sounds like by itself. So I used this particular FX because I liked the coloring that playing in fifths as you moved up chromatically would give. I finished off this return to the A section with the detuned FX because it's kind of like as you go through the song, the person gets progressively more and more tipsy, and so now they're at a point where even the notes that they're playing, or their identity or something like that, becomes a little muddier, and so I kind of wanted to use the detuned one to emulate that. Compare that to the first section. The first section is a lot more locked in when it comes to pitch compared to the second section. So that's pretty much it with this one. To recap, the main approaches I was using to create this composition was playing around with different timbres and textures and tone and layering them to create movement and to continue interest, even if they're playing the same thing or playing something really similar to it. And then the second approach is tackling this composition with a slight framework of where it's going in mind. So with this song, it started out as someone walks into a bar, a little bit excited to drink, and kind of gets a little bit tipsy and gets progressively tipsier towards the end. Sometimes having a concept in mind before you start will give you a more cohesive composition at the end. But of course, don't be afraid to experiment. Sometimes you'll discover that concept as you go. So thanks again for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.